The pregnancy test sat on the edge of the bathroom sink, its two pink lines mocking Eliza Foster as she stared at her reflection in the mirror of the rundown motel room. Outside, the Montana winter howled against the windows, snow piling in drifts. That matched the coldness settling in her chest. Her wedding dress hung limply on the closet door, a painful reminder of promises broken just hours ago. The groom who had ordered her through an international marriage agency was nowhere to be found, leaving her alone, pregnant, and 5,000 miles from the Ukrainian village she once called home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 24 hours earlier, Eliza had been preparing for her wedding day, carefully applying makeup to hide the exhaustion of morning sickness and international travel. Before we continue with her story, if you're watching this, leave a comment telling us where you're from. And if Eliza's journey speaks to you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, we've got something special coming for you. The small town of Pine Ridge, Montana wasn't what she had pictured when Connor Walsh's letters described his modest ranch and comfortable lifestyle. His photograph showed a handsome man in his early 30s standing proudly beside horses and cattle, promising a stable future for her and the baby she hadn't yet told him about. The agency had arranged everything: her visa, her travel, the wedding preparations, all paid for by Connor, who had written that he was eager to start a family with the right woman. The humiliation still burned in her throat as she remembered. Standing in the small church, 20 guests shifting uncomfortably in wooden pews as the minutes ticked by. After 40 minutes, Pastor Miller had gently suggested postponing the ceremony. Connor's mother had burst into tears, clutching her handkerchief and avoiding Eliza's eyes. His father had muttered something about knowing this mail-order nonsense was a mistake before storming out. It was Connor's brother, Nathan Walsh, who had finally approached the altar with the kind of reluctance that suggested he'd drawn the short straw. "Connor's not coming," he had said, his deep voice carrying in the hushed church. "He left town last night. Sighed he couldn't go through with it." The words had cut through Eliza like a knife, leaving her breathless and dizzy as the room seemed to spin around her. Now, with just $237 to her name and a baby growing inside her, Eliza was facing the hardest decision of her life. Her return ticket to Ukraine was for 3 weeks after the wedding date, Connor's idea to give them a honeymoon period before she would return briefly to settle her affairs. The cheap motel room was paid up for 2 more nights, courtesy of Nathan Walsh, who had insisted on covering it after the wedding disaster. The knock at the door startled her. Eliza quickly wiped her tears, straightening her oversized sweater before opening the door a cautious few inches. Nathan Walsh stood in the hallway, snow dusting the shoulders of his dark jacket, his expression unreadable beneath his cowboy hat. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in the church. "We need to talk about your situation." Eliza hesitated, then stepped back to allow him entry. Unlike his younger brother, Nathan was taller, broader, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years working outdoors. Where Connor had been smoothly handsome, Nathan's features were more rugged, weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were the same Walsh family blue, but lacked Connor's easy charm instead. They held a steadiness that Eliza found herself responding to despite her wariness. "I'm sorry about what happened," he said, removing his hat and holding it awkwardly in his hands. "Connor has always been impulsive, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. Do you know where he is?" Eliza asked, hating the fragile hope in her voice. Nathan shook his head. He emptied his bank account and took off. Left a note saying he wasn't ready for marriage. Sighed he felt trapped. He paused, his jaw tightening. What he did was unforgivable. Eliza sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly too tired to maintain her composure. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, the words scraping her throat. I don't have enough money to stay until my return flight, and Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach before she caught herself. Nathan's eyes followed the movement, understanding dawning on his face. "You're pregnant," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Eliza nodded, tears threatening again. 8 weeks. I was going to tell Connor after the wedding. I thought he would be happy. The bitter laugh that escaped her held no humor. I was wrong about many things, it seems. Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, his expression conflicted. "Look, I have a proposition for you. It's not ideal, but it might help us both." He moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered parking lot as if gathering his thoughts. The Walsh ranch needs help. My father's health is failing, and Connor was supposed to take over the administrative side of things while I handled the cattle and land management. Now he's gone, and I'm drowning in paperwork and logistics I don't have time for. He turned back to face her. "The agency profile said you worked as an office manager in Key. Is that true?" "Yes," Eliza said cautiously. "I managed an export business for 5 years. Accounting, correspondence, scheduling, logistics. Then I'd like to offer you a job," Nathan said. "Room and board at the ranch plus a salary. It would give you time to figure out your next steps, and it would help me keep the ranch running while I sort out the mess Connor left behind." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Eliza stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You want to hire me? After what happened?" "Your parents. My parents don't make decisions for the ranch anymore," Nathan interrupted, his tone firm. "Dad signed operational control over to me last year when his health declined. And Mom," he hesitated. "Mom will come around once. She sees that you're not to blame for Connor's actions." "And the baby?" Eliza asked, needing to be clear. Nathan's expression softened slightly. "That baby is my niece or nephew, regardless of Connor's choices. I won't see either of you homeless or struggling if I can help it." Eliza studied his face, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives. All she saw was exhaustion and a straightforward determination that matched his words. "Why would you do this for me? You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know you traveled halfway around the world based on promises my brother made. I know you didn't deserve what happened in that church. And I know the Walsh family pays its debts." He paused. "Connor created this situation. I can't fix what he broke, but I can offer you a practical solution that benefits us both." Eliza weighed her options, which were painfully few. Return to Ukraine pregnant and shamed, facing the judgment of her small village? Stay in this motel until her money ran out, then what? Nathan's offer wasn't charity, it was a job, a chance to maintain her dignity and independence while figuring out her future. "I would need my own space," she said finally, "and a formal employment contract." The corner of Nathan's mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "The ranch has a caretaker's cottage that's sitting empty. It's small but private. And I'll have a proper contract drawn up by tomorrow." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal, Ms. Foster?" Eliza took his hand, noting the calluses and strength in his grip. "We have a deal, Mr. Walsh." The Walsh ranch was larger than Eliza had expected, sprawling across rolling hills at the foot of mountain ranges that stretched toward the horizon. The main house was a 2-story structure of logs and stone that looked like it had stood for generations, surrounded by barns, equipment sheds, and outbuildings that spoke of a serious working ranch rather than a hobby farm. Nathan drove his truck slowly up the gravel driveway, conscious of the icy patches hidden beneath fresh snow. "It's about 5,000 acres, he explained as Eliza took in the scope of the property. "Been in the family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather started with 200 acres and built it up from there." The caretaker's cottage turned out to be a small but well-maintained building near a grove of pine trees, far enough from the main house for privacy, but close enough to be convenient. Inside, it was basic but clean: a combined living room and kitchen, a small bedroom, and a bathroom with a shower that produced surprisingly good water pressure. "It's not fancy," Nathan said, watching her inspect the space. "But the heating works well, and there's internet access." The previous caretaker was my father's cousin who moved to Arizona last year for his arthritis. "It's perfect," Eliza said honestly. After weeks in transit and the disaster of the previous day, the simple cottage felt like a sanctuary. "When would you like me to start work?" "Tomorrow's soon enough," Nathan replied. "Get settled in today. I'll bring some groceries from the main house to tide you over until we can get to town." He hesitated at the door. "The ranch hands don't know about the baby or exactly who you are." "I told them you're a business consultant I've hired to help with ranch administration. What you share beyond that is up to you." Eliza appreciated his discretion. "Thank you. I prefer to keep my personal situation private for now." After Nathan left, Eliza unpacked her meager belongings, carefully hanging her few clothes in the small closet. The wedding dress she stuffed into the back, unable to discard it completely but unwilling to look at it daily. Her hand rested briefly on her still flat stomach, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. She was in a foreign country, pregnant, working for the brother of the man who had abandoned her. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life she had now. The next morning, Nathan showed her to the ranch office, a converted bedroom. In the main house, with a desk that looked like it had survived several wars, and filing cabinets bursting with disorganized papers. The computer was outdated but functional, the printer making ominous noises when Nathan demonstrated it. "My father handled all the administrative work until his stroke last year," Nathan explained, gesturing to the chaos. "Then Connor was supposed to take over this side of things, but he never really committed to learning the systems. I've been trying to keep up, but honestly, I'm better with cattle than computers." Eliza surveyed the room, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done. "May I see the accounting software and filing system first? I need to understand how everything is organized before I can start making improvements." Nathan's laugh was short but genuine. "Accounting software? Filing system? You're looking at 3 generations of shove it in a drawer and hope for the best. Dad kept most of it in his head, and what he did write down is..." He gestured to a shelf of leather-bound ledgers, "in there somewhere." The challenge was daunting but not insurmountable. Eliza had rebuilt filing systems before, had implemented digital record-keeping for businesses still using paper ledgers. This was familiar territory, and the focus on concrete problems was a welcome distraction from her personal troubles. "I'll need a few days to assess everything," she said, already rolling up her sleeves. "Then I can present you with a plan for organizing the administrative systems and bringing the record-keeping up to date." Nathan nodded, looking relieved. "Whatever you think is best. I trust your judgment." Those words, so simple, yet so unexpected, caught Eliza off guard. Trust was not something she had anticipated in this arrangement, especially not so soon. But as Nathan left her to explore the chaotic office, she realized that his straightforward approach to their situation was exactly what she needed. No false promises, no empty flattery, just honest work and mutual respect. The first week at Walsh Ranch was a blur of activity as Eliza immersed herself in untangling years of administrative neglect. She discovered unpaid invoices, uncashed checks, tax forms that should have been filed months ago, and equipment maintenance. Records scattered across multiple incomplete systems. The ranch was profitable, barely, but only because the quality of the cattle and Nathan's expertise in land management offset the administrative inefficiencies. Nathan checked in regularly, but never hovered, giving her space to work while making himself available for questions. He brought her lunch when she worked through midday, insisting that she needed to keep up her strength, though he never directly mentioned the pregnancy. It was during one of these lunch breaks, as January snow fell gently outside the office window, that Eliza first glimpsed the deeper layers of Nathan Walsh. He had brought homemade soup and fresh bread, setting them on the cleared corner of her desk with his usual quiet efficiency. "The cattle are handling the cold well," he said, his standard opening to their conversations, safe, impersonal, focused on the ranch. "But we'll need to increase their feed ration if this weather holds." Eliza nodded, serving herself soup. That smelled deliciously of herbs and vegetables. "I found the feed supplier contracts. Did you know we're paying nearly 20% more than market rate? The agreement hasn't been renegotiated in 3 years." Nathan's eyebrows rose. "I had no idea. Dad always handled those contracts, and then with his health declining," he shook his head. "That's exactly why I needed your help. What do you recommend?" "I've drafted a new contract proposal and researched 3 alternative suppliers," Eliza said, sliding a folder across the desk. "This could save the ranch nearly $30,000 annually." Nathan reviewed the documents, his expression shifting from surprise to approval. "This is excellent work. How did you pull this together so quickly?" "I couldn't sleep last night," Eliza admitted. "The baby has decided that 3 a.m. is the perfect time to make me nauseous. Working helps take my mind off it." It was the first time she had directly referenced her pregnancy to him since that day in the motel room. Nathan's eyes softened, though. His expression remained carefully neutral. "Have you seen a doctor yet?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual. Eliza shook her head. "I don't have American health insurance. In Ukraine, I had prenatal care for the first 6 weeks, but here..." She shrugged, trying to mask her concern. Nathan set down the folder. "The ranch has a health insurance policy that covers essential staff. As of this morning, that includes you. I've added you to our plan." He slid an insurance card across the desk. "There's a good OB-GYN in town who takes our insurance. I took the liberty of making an appointment for next week, if that's acceptable." Eliza stared at the card, then at Nathan, unable to hide her surprise. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied simply. "It's the right thing to do, both as your employer and as..." He hesitated, "as family in a way." The word family hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to examine. Eliza focused on the practical aspects instead. "Thank you. I'll pay you back for any costs not covered by insurance." "That's not necessary," Nathan said, standing to leave. "Consider it part of your employment package." At the door, he paused. "By the way, my mother asked if you'd join us for dinner this Sunday. She says it's time she properly met the woman saving the ranch's finances." Eliza tensed. Margaret Walsh had barely spoken to her since the wedding disaster, her few interactions marked by stiff politeness that barely masked her discomfort. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," Nathan admitted with unexpected frankness. "But she's trying, in her way. Dad's confined to his bedroom most days now, and she's lonely. It would mean a lot to her." Unable to refuse such a direct request, Eliza agreed, though the prospect of Sunday dinner with Margaret Walsh filled her with apprehension. The older woman had made it clear in 100 small ways that Eliza represented a painful reminder of her younger son's disgrace. The dinner proved less uncomfortable than Eliza had feared. Margaret Walsh was a woman of the old ranching tradition, stoic, practical, and fiercely protective of her family legacy. Her initial coolness thawed slightly. As the meal progressed, especially when Nathan detailed the financial improvements Eliza had already implemented. "You certainly know your business," Margaret conceded, serving apple pie for dessert. "Nathan tells me you've identified nearly $50,000 in potential annual savings." "The ranch is fundamentally sound," Eliza replied, choosing her words carefully. "It just needed administrative updating." Your husband built something impressive here." At the mention of her husband, Margaret's expression softened. Thomas had a way with cattle that was almost magical. He could look at a herd and tell you exactly which animals would produce the best offspring, which ones needed extra attention. Nathan has that same gift. Her eyes flicked to her son, pride momentarily overcoming her reserve. What he doesn't have is Thomas's head for business, or Connor's charm. The mention of Connor created an instant tension, the name landing like a stone in still water. Nathan's jaw tightened, though he said nothing. "I apologize," Margaret said after an awkward silence. "I shouldn't have mentioned him." "It's all right," Eliza said quietly. "Connor is part of this family's story. Pretending he doesn't exist won't change what happened." Margaret studied her with new intensity. "You're very practical about it all. If someone had left me at the altar, pregnant with their child, I'm not sure I could be so composed." Eliza nearly dropped her fork. "How did you? I've raised 2 boys on a ranch, dear." "I know the signs." Margaret's tone was matter-of-fact. "And this is a small town. Dr. Reynolds has been our family physician for 30 years. He didn't tell me outright doctor-patient confidentiality and all that, but he made sure I understood that your condition required special consideration." Nathan looked between the 2 women, clearly bracing for conflict. Instead, Margaret surprised them both. "That child you're carrying is a Walsh, regardless of Connor's poor decisions. On this ranch, family takes care of family, even when some members don't live up to their responsibilities." She served Eliza another slice of pie without asking. "You need to eat more. You're too thin for a woman in your condition." It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was something close to it, a pragmatic acknowledgement of reality and a tentative extension of family protection. Eliza felt a knot of tension she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to loosen. As January turned to February, Eliza settled into a routine at Walsh Ranch. Mornings were spent in the office, organizing finances and correspondence. Afternoons often found her observing various ranch operations, learning the practical side of the business to better understand the administrative needs. Her pregnancy progressed without complications, the first trimester nausea giving way to a healthy appetite and gradually expanding waistline. Nathan proved to be a surprisingly thoughtful employer, adjusting her responsibilities when she was tired and ensuring she never lifted anything heavier than a file box. Their professional relationship developed into something like friendship, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to the ranch's success. It was during a late February snowstorm, when howling winds made the cottage windows rattle, that Eliza first saw beyond Nathan's carefully maintained facade. A power line had gone down, cutting electricity to the outlying buildings. Nathan arrived at her door with firewood, emergency lanterns, and an insistent border collie named Scout who refused to stay behind. "The main house has a generator," he explained, stamping snow from his boots. "But the cottage's backup system is outdated. You shouldn't be alone in this cold." Eliza had been managing fine with blankets and the small wood stove, but she recognized the concern behind his practical explanation. "I appreciate the firewood. Scout is welcome too, of course." They worked together to build up the fire, the domesticity of the moment striking Eliza as both strange and comforting. Nathan moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to handling emergencies, his hands capable and sure as he arranged logs in the stove. "My father always said you can tell everything you need to know about a person by how they handle 3 things: animals, money, and bad weather," Nathan remarked, closing the stove door. "So far, you're handling all 3 better than most people." Born in Montana, Eliza smiled at the unexpected compliment. "In Ukraine, winters can be harsh too. My village often lost power during storms. You learn to prepare." They settled on opposite ends of the small couch. Scout curled between them as the wind howled outside. The lantern cast warm light across the room, creating a sense of sanctuary against the storm. "May I ask you something personal?" "Nathan," said after a comfortable silence. Eliza nodded, curious. "Why did you agree to be a mail-order bride? You're educated, capable, beautiful." He looked embarrassed at the last word, as if it had slipped out unintentionally. "You could have had your pick of men in Ukraine, I imagine." The question wasn't asked with judgment, just genuine curiosity. Eliza considered how to answer, how much to reveal about the economic desperation and limited opportunities that had led her to respond to the International Marriage Agency's advertisements. "Life in my village has become very difficult since the conflicts began," she said finally. "Jobs disappeared. Prices rose. My parents died 3 years ago, a car accident in winter, like this one." She gestured to the storm outside. "I moved to Kyiv for work, but when the export company downsized, I found myself with few options." She rested a hand on her stomach. "When I discovered I was pregnant, from a relationship that had already ended, my situation became more desperate. The agency promised a better life in America, security for me and my child." Nathan's expression darkened. "Connor knew about the baby?" "No," Eliza said quickly. "That happened after I had already begun correspondence with him. The pregnancy was unexpected. The father was a coworker who ended our relationship when he was transferred to another city." She hesitated. "I didn't tell Connor because I was afraid he would withdraw his offer. The agency warned us not to share any information that might jeopardize potential matches. So you came here, carrying another man's child, to marry a stranger." Nathan's tone wasn't accusatory, but wondering. "That took incredible courage." Eliza had never thought of it as courage, just desperate necessity. "It took having no better options," she corrected gently. Nathan studied her face in the lantern light. "And now? What do you want for your future?" The question caught her off guard. What did she want? Since discovering her pregnancy, she had been in survival mode, focused on immediate needs rather than long-term dreams. "Security," she said finally. "A safe place for my child to grow up. Work that has meaning. Perhaps someday, a partnership based on mutual respect rather than necessity." "Not love?" Nathan asked quietly. Eliza smiled wryly. "Love is a luxury I cannot afford to prioritize right now. Trust and respect seem more reliable foundations." Nathan nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "My parents' marriage was arranged, in a way. Not formally, but they were matched by their families, who owned neighboring ranches. They grew to love each other deeply, but it started with shared purpose and respect." He poked at the fire, adjusting a log. "I always thought Connor and I had the same example of what marriage should be, but somehow we drew completely different lessons from it." The conversation was venturing into territory that made Eliza uncomfortable, too personal, too close to wounds still healing. She changed the subject, asking about the ranch's spring plans for cattle rotation, and Nathan followed her lead without protest. They talked late into the night as the storm raged outside, discussing ranch operations, sharing stories of their childhoods, discovering unexpected common ground despite their different backgrounds. When Eliza finally yawned, unable to keep her eyes open any longer, Nathan insisted she take the bedroom while he slept on the couch with Scout. "I've slept in barn lofts during calving season," he said, waving away her protests. "This couch is luxury by comparison." As Eliza drifted toward sleep, listening to the muffled sounds of Nathan moving quietly in the other room, she realized this was the first time since arriving in Montana that she felt truly safe. Not just physically protected from the storm, but emotionally secure in a way she hadn't experienced since before her parents' death. It wasn't love, as she had told Nathan, but it was something equally valuable: the foundation of trust between two people who had every reason to be wary but were choosing connection instead. The storm marked a turning point in their relationship. Something had shifted that night, a barrier lowered through honest conversation and shared vulnerability. In the weeks that followed, Nathan began including Eliza in more aspects of ranch operations, not just the administrative side, but decisions about cattle breeding, land management, and staff assignments. Margaret Walsh noticed the change, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she observed her son and Eliza working together. One afternoon in early March, as they reviewed spring planting plans at the kitchen table, Margaret set down her knitting with deliberate precision. "You make a good team," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Better than Connor and Nathan ever did, even as boys." Eliza glanced up, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected observation. Nathan saved her from having to reply. "Eliza understands ranching in ways Connor never bothered to learn," he said, his voice holding an edge whenever he mentioned his brother. "She sees the connection between the administrative work and what happens on the land." Margaret nodded, picking up her knitting again. "It's a shame, really. If things had been different." She let the thought trail off, but her meaning was clear enough. If Connor had been the man they all thought he was, if he had shown up for his responsibilities, if he had valued what was being offered to him, Eliza might have found the partnership. She sought through the original arrangement. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. Nathan focused intently on the documents before him, avoiding both women's eyes. Later that week, as Eliza's pregnancy entered its 4th month, the past came roaring back into their carefully constructed new reality. She was sorting mail in the office when she found an envelope addressed to Connor Walsh, postmarked from Las Vegas. Without thinking, she set it aside in the pile for Nathan's attention. That evening, Nathan appeared at her cottage door, his expression more closed off than she had seen it in weeks. He held the unopened envelope between 2 fingers as if it might bite. "Connor's credit card statement," he said flatly. "It's been forwarded here from his old address in Bozeman." He hesitated. "I opened it. There's a problem we need to discuss." Eliza invited him in, a sense of foreboding settling over her as Nathan placed the statement on her small kitchen table. The charges told a damning story. Cash advances totaling over $50,000, luxury hotel stays, gambling expenses, and most troublingly, purchases from high-end jewelry stores in the weeks before the wedding. "He was planning to run," Nathan said, his voice tight with anger. "These cash advances were taken out 2 weeks before your arrival. He was setting himself up with a nest egg while pretending to prepare for your wedding." Eliza stared at the statement, a cold clarity washing over her. "The agency fees, my travel expenses, the wedding preparations, he charged them all, didn't he?" "He never intended to pay them off," Nathan nodded grimly. "And here's where it becomes our problem. Connor used the ranch's business credit card for all of it. These aren't personal charges, they're business expenses that he falsified. The ranch is liable for nearly $85,000 in fraudulent charges, and the credit card company is threatening to involve the authorities if we don't make arrangements to cover the debt." The implications hit Eliza like a physical blow. After all her work to improve the ranch's finances, after the careful budgeting and cost-cutting measures she had implemented, they were facing a financial crisis that could undo everything they had accomplished. "How bad is it?" she asked, her hands instinctively moving to protect her growing belly. "Can the ranch survive this?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of extreme stress. "We have options, but none of them are good. We can try to negotiate with the credit card company, prove the charges were fraudulent, but that means filing a police report against Connor. Or we can liquidate some assets to cover the debt, but that means selling off cattle we need for breeding, or equipment we need for operations." The third option hung unspoken between them: find Connor and force him to take responsibility for his actions. But that would mean reopening wounds that were only beginning to heal, and Connor had proven himself masterfully elusive. "There's another possibility," Eliza said slowly, an idea forming as she spoke. "The administrative improvements we've made have increased efficiency and reduced costs. If we can secure a bridge loan to cover the immediate debt, we could increase production enough to pay it off within 2 years without sacrificing essential assets." Nathan looked at her with surprise that quickly shifted to consideration. "You think the ranch could generate that much additional revenue?" "With the right investments and management, yes." Eliza pulled a notebook from her bag, quickly outlining projected revenue streams and cost-saving measures they hadn't yet implemented. "We would need to be aggressive with growth, but the foundation is solid." As they worked through the numbers late into the night, the we and our in their conversation went unremarked, but not unnoticed. Somewhere in the process of solving Connor's mess, the ranch had become their shared responsibility rather than just Nathan's burden. And Eliza, who had arrived as a mail-order bride seeking security, had become something neither of them had anticipated, a true partner in building a future neither of them had planned. The next morning, as they presented their financial recovery plan to Margaret, the older woman listened with careful attention before asking the question that had been hanging over the situation from the beginning. "And where does this leave the two of you?" she asked, looking between her son and Eliza. "This plan requires years of commitment from both of you. Is that something you're prepared to offer each other?" Nathan glanced at Eliza, his expression open in a way it rarely was around others. "I think that's a conversation Eliza and I need to have privately." Margaret nodded, a knowing look crossing her face. "Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I have my grandson or granddaughter to consider now, after all." As she left the room, Eliza felt the weight of impending decisions pressing down on her. The baby would arrive in 5 months. The ranch needed stability and commitment. And she and Nathan had built something neither had expected, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose that was beginning to feel like something more. That evening, as spring's first tentative warmth softened the Montana air, Nathan invited Eliza to walk with him to the ridge overlooking the ranch. The view was breathtaking: rolling pastures, grazing cattle, and the distant mountains touched with the day's last light. "This land has been in my family for generations," Nathan said, his voice quiet against the vastness of the landscape. "I've never imagined living anywhere else or doing anything else with my life. It's not just work for me, it's home." Eliza understood what he was trying to say. "You're worried about risking it all on this financial recovery plan." "No," he said, surprising her. "I'm worried about asking you to commit to a life you never chose. You came to Montana to marry Connor, not to save a struggling ranch with his less charming brother." The blunt honesty made her smile despite the seriousness of the moment. "I came to Montana looking for security and partnership," she corrected gently. "I thought Connor offered that, but I was wrong." She turned to face Nathan directly. "What I found here with you, it isn't what I expected, but it might be what I needed all along." Nathan's expression shifted, hope warring with caution. "What are you saying, Eliza?" "I'm saying that I want to stay," she replied simply. "Not just until the baby comes, not just until we solve the financial crisis, but longer term. I want to help build something here that will last for the child, for us, for the ranch." She took a deep breath. "But I need to know if that's what you want too." Nathan was silent for a long moment, looking out over the ranch as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. When he turned back to her, his expression had cleared, as if he'd made a decision he'd been wrestling with for weeks. "I need a partner," he said finally, "and you need a home. Maybe we can help each other find what we're both looking for." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I'm not Connor. I can't offer charm or excitement. But I can promise honesty, respect, and a commitment to building something meaningful together, for the ranch, for the baby, and for us, if you'll give me that chance." It wasn't a declaration of love or a romantic proposal. But in that moment, standing on the ridge with the ranch spread below them like a promise, it felt more real and more valuable than any flowery words could have been. Eliza's fingers tightened around his, an answer more eloquent than speech. As they walked back toward the ranch buildings, hand in hand in the gathering dusk, Eliza reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had come to America as a mail-order bride, then abandoned at the altar, and found herself building a new life with a man she had never expected to care for. It wasn't the future she had planned, but as the baby moved inside her and Nathan's steady presence walked beside her, she realized it might be better than anything she could have imagined on her own. The wedding dress still hung in the back of her closet, a reminder of promises broken and expectations shattered. But as winter gave way to spring on Walsh Ranch, that reminder held less power with each passing day. New promises were being made, stronger than the old ones because they were built on truth rather than fantasy, on partnership rather than rescue. Eliza Foster had arrived in Montana seeking security for herself and her unborn child. What she had found instead was the chance to create something lasting with a man who valued her strength rather than her vulnerability, her competence rather than her need. It wasn't the ending she had expected to her journey, but as she and Nathan walked toward the warm lights of the ranch house, she realized it was just the beginning of a story neither of them could have written alone. Spring arrived in Montana with the gentle persistence of wildflowers pushing through melting snow. By mid-April, Walsh Ranch was transforming from winter's stillness to the vibrant activity that marked calving season. Eliza's days fell into a rhythm that balanced office work with increasing involvement in ranch operations. Her pregnancy progressed steadily, her belly now a visible reminder of the life growing within her. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next heartwarming videos. The financial recovery plan she and Nathan had created was showing promising results. Their loan application had been approved with better terms than expected, thanks to Eliza's meticulous presentation of the ranch's improved financial position. The debt Connor had left behind still loomed large, but it no longer threatened to overwhelm them. "You've done more for this ranch in 3 months than Connor did in 3 years," Margaret observed one morning as she and Eliza reviewed the latest cattle birth records in the kitchen. The older woman's initial coolness had gradually thawed, replaced by a reluctant but growing respect. Nathan's different too, more focused, more confident. Eliza kept her eyes on the documents, unsure how to respond to Margaret's implied observations about her son. The ranch has potential that wasn't being fully realized. We're just implementing better systems to maximize productivity. Margaret's knowing smile suggested she wasn't fooled by Eliza's professional deflection. Systems, is it? And I suppose it's just systems that have my son whistling while he mends fences, something I haven't heard him do since he was a teenager. Before Eliza could formulate a response, the kitchen door swung open and Nathan entered, bringing with him the scent of spring air and something else, tension. His expression was troubled, his movements stiff as he poured himself coffee without meeting either woman's eyes. "What's happened?" Margaret asked, instantly alert to her son's mood. Nathan took a deep breath before turning to face them. "Connor called." The name fell into the room like a stone, creating ripples of shock. In the months since the wedding disaster, Connor Walsh had been a ghost present in the problems he'd left behind, but absent in body. What did he want? Margaret's voice had gone cold, her momentary softness vanishing at the mention of her younger son. "Money, of course." Nathan's jaw tightened. "He's in Las Vegas, out of cash, and in trouble with some people who don't take IOUs. He wants $25,000 to settle his debts before coming home." Eliza felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spring morning. "Is he coming back here? To the ranch?" Nathan's eyes met hers, understanding her unspoken concern. Not if I have anything to say about it. I told him the ranch can't bail him out of his gambling debts, especially after the credit card fraud. And how did he take that? Margaret asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. About as well as you'd expect. Nathan set his coffee cup down with careful control. He threatened to come back anyway, said he still owns part of the ranch and has a right to be here. Then he hesitated, glancing at Eliza. He mentioned you, said some things I won't repeat. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Connor's return would complicate everything, the careful partnership she and Nathan were building, the stability she was creating for her child, the future of the ranch they were working to secure. What are you going to do? Eliza asked finally. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of deep frustration. I've consulted our lawyer. Connor does still own a small percentage of the ranch, about 15% that our father left him. But the operating agreement gives me full control of day-to-day operations and financial decisions. Can you buy him out? Margaret asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Get rid of his stake completely? Not without selling off assets we can't afford to lose, especially with the loan repayments just beginning. Nathan's expression was grim. But we can legally prevent him from living on the property or interfering with ranch operations. Eliza felt the baby move inside her, a fluttering reminder of how much was at stake. Do you think he'll really come back? Connor has always done exactly what he wants, regardless of who gets hurt, Margaret said before Nathan could answer. But he's also lazy. If coming back means work and responsibility rather than easy money, he'll probably stay away. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mike Donovan, the ranch foreman, his weathered face tense as he appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got a situation with the new calves in the north pasture. Some kind of respiratory problem. Dr. Harrison is on her way, but you should come see. The crisis with the calves, a treatable infection that had been caught just in time, occupied everyone's attention for the next several days, temporarily pushing concerns about Connor to the background. Eliza found herself working alongside the ranch hands, helping to administer medications and monitor the affected animals. The work was physically demanding, especially in her condition, but she refused to stay behind in the office when her help was needed. You're good at this, Mike Donovan remarked on the third evening as they finished treating the last group of calves. The foreman had been skeptical of Eliza at first, viewing her as an office worker who wouldn't understand the realities of ranch life. His approval, hard-earned through shared work, meant more than she had expected. I grew up with animals, she explained, sanitizing equipment with practiced efficiency. Not cattle, but principles of care are similar. Animals know when you're committed to helping them. Mike nodded, a new respect in his eyes. Boss is lucky to have found you. This place was falling apart after Mr. Walsh got sick and Connor took off. He hesitated. Folks in town are talking, you know, about you and Nathan, about the baby. Eliza stiffened. She had ventured into Pine Ridge only a few times since the wedding disaster, but had felt the stares and whispers each time. In a town of barely 2,000 people, the mail-order bride left at the altar was memorable gossip. Her growing pregnancy had only added fuel to the speculation. People will always talk, she said carefully. It doesn't change what needs to be done here. That's just it, Mike said, surprising her. The hands wanted me to tell you what happened with Connor. It wasn't right. But the way you've stepped up, helped save this ranch, earned people's respect through hard work instead of just being someone's wife. He shrugged, uncomfortable with emotional declarations. Well, folks are coming around is all I'm saying. The simple validation from the ranch community meant more to Eliza than she could express. She had come to America seeking acceptance and security, expecting to find it through marriage. Instead, she was earning it through her own merits, building Relationships based on respect rather than obligation. That night, as she and Nathan reviewed the day's progress with the sick calves, she told him about her conversation with Mike. They were sitting on the porch of the main house, the spring evening mild enough to be comfortable with just light. "Jackets. The ranch hands are protective of this place," Nathan said, a hint of pride in his voice. "They can tell you care about more than just your own interests." Eliza looked out over the property, at the pastures turning green in the twilight. "I never expected to feel this way about a place that isn't my homeland. But there's something about this ranch that feels." She searched for the right word. "Like home?" Nathan supplied quietly. She nodded, surprised at how true it felt. "Yes, like a place I could belong." Nathan was silent for a moment, his profile thoughtful in the fading light. "I've been meaning to ask you something, but with everything that's happened, the financial crisis, the calves getting sick, Connor's call, it never seemed like the right time." Eliza turned to him, curious. "What is it?" "The partnership we talked about on the ridge that evening." His voice was steady, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "I've been thinking about what that might look like long term. For us, for the baby." Before he could continue, headlights appeared on the ranch road, a vehicle approaching too fast for the rutted dirt lane. The tires skidded slightly as the car, a rental, by the look of it, came to an abrupt stop in front of the house. "Oh, no," Nathan muttered, rising to his feet as the driver's door swung open. Connor Walsh emerged from the car, unsteady on his feet and reeking of alcohol even from a distance. He was thinner than in the photographs Eliza had seen, his handsome features sharpened by what looked like months of hard living. His clothes were expensive but rumpled, as if he'd been wearing them for days. "Well, isn't this cozy?" he called, his words slurring slightly. "My big brother and my runaway bride, playing house while I'm out there fighting for my life." Nathan moved protectively in front of Eliza, his body language shifting to something she hadn't seen before, the calm confidence of the rancher replaced by tightly controlled anger. "You're drunk, Connor, and you're not welcome here." Connor laughed, the sound bitter and slightly manic. "Not welcome? This is my home too, big brother. My name's on the deed, same as yours." His bloodshot eyes fixed on Eliza, narrowing as they took in her pregnant figure. "Didn't waste any time, did you? Swapping one Walsh for another?" The crude implication hung in the air, but before either Nathan or Eliza could respond, another figure appeared on the porch, Margaret Walsh, her expression a mixture of grief and fury as she stared at her younger son. "Connor James Walsh," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. "You will not speak to your brother or Miss Foster that way. Not on this property." Connor's expression changed at the sight of his mother, a flash of something almost like shame crossing his face before he masked it with bravado. "Mom, you look well. Still taking his side, I see." "I'm taking the side of decency and responsibility," Margaret replied. "Two things you seem to have forgotten completely." The family drama unfolding before her made Eliza acutely aware of her outsider status, despite the months she had spent at Walsh Ranch. This was a deeper conflict, years in the making, with roots that went back long before she had entered their lives. "I think I should go," she said quietly to Nathan. "This is a family matter." His hand caught hers, warm and steady. "You are family," he said, loud enough for Connor to hear. "You've earned your place here in ways he never bothered to try." Connor's laugh was ugly. "Oh, I'm sure she's earned it. Tell me, brother, how long did you wait after I left before taking my place in her bed? Was it days? Hours?" Nathan's entire body tensed, and for a moment, Eliza thought he might physically confront his brother. Instead, he took a deep breath, visibly controlling himself. "You need to leave, Connor. You're drunk, you're making false accusations, and you're trespassing on private property." "Trespassing? On my own family's land?" Connor spread his arms wide, his balance precarious. "I grew up here. I have rights." Rights you forfeited when you committed fraud, abandoned your responsibilities, and left us to clean up your mess. Nathan replied, his voice cold. The ranch's lawyer will contact you about buying out your remaining interest. Until then, you're not welcome on this property. Connor's face darkened with anger. You can't keep me away from what's mine. And her? He pointed at Eliza, his gesture unsteady. She came here for me. Made promises to me. She's carrying my child, isn't she? That's why you're so protective? The accusation was so unexpected that Eliza gasped. What? No. This child has nothing to do with you. Connor's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Then whose is it? Some guy back in whatever Eastern European hellhole you came from. Or did my brother move in on you that quickly? Before Eliza could respond, Margaret stepped forward, her expression thunderous. That's enough, Connor. The baby's father isn't your concern. What should concern you is the legal trouble you're in. Credit card fraud is a serious offense, and the company is pressing charges. This was news to Eliza, who glanced at Nathan in surprise. He gave a slight nod, confirming his mother's statement. Connor's bravado faltered. What are you talking about? I just used the company card for some business expenses. Gambling in Las Vegas is not a business expense, Nathan said flatly. Neither is buying jewelry for women who aren't your fiancé, which we found out about from the credit card statements. The fraud investigation is already underway. The color drained from Connor's face. You reported me to the police? Your own brother? You gave us no choice, Margaret said, her voice softening slightly despite her firm expression. Connor, you need help. The drinking, the gambling, the running away from responsibilities. This isn't who your father and I raised you to be. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across Connor's face, a glimpse of the lost young man beneath the arrogant exterior. Then it hardened again, pride and anger reasserting themselves. I don't need your help or your lectures. He spat. Keep your precious ranch. I'll get my money elsewhere. He turned toward his car, then paused, looking back at Eliza with a mixture of resentment and something almost like regret. You know, I really did plan to go through with it. The wedding, the marriage, all of it. Then I realized I'd be trapped. Here forever, just like him. He jerked his head toward Nathan. Tied to this land, these responsibilities, this life I never chose. The admission should have hurt, but Eliza felt only a distant sadness for the man who had once been her intended husband. I understand feeling trapped, she said quietly. But sometimes what looks like a prison is actually a foundation to build something meaningful. You could have made that choice too. Connor's laugh was hollow. Always the practical one, aren't you? No wonder you and my brother get along so well. Two responsible adults, so busy doing the right thing that you forget to actually live. He got into his car, the engine roaring to life. Enjoy your perfect little life. I'll be out there in the real world, actually experiencing something beyond these fences. They watched in silence as he drove away, the taillights disappearing down the ranch road. Only when the dust had settled did Eliza realize she was trembling. Reaction setting in now that the confrontation was over. Nathan's arm went around her shoulders, steady and warm. Are you all right? She nodded, though all right seemed inadequate to describe the turmoil of emotions Connor's appearance had stirred. I just never expected to see him again, especially not like that. Margaret sighed, suddenly looking older than her years. He's always been this way, brilliant but restless, charming but empty underneath it. Thomas and I thought he'd grow out of it, that responsibility would mature him. She shook her head. We were wrong. The three of them went inside, the warm kitchen a sanctuary after the ugly scene outside. Margaret busied herself making tea, the familiar ritual seeming to calm her. Will he really be arrested? Eliza asked, settling heavily into a chair at the table. The baby was active tonight, perhaps responding to her stress. Nathan nodded, taking the seat beside her. The credit card company filed the report last week. We didn't have a choice, they were going to do it anyway, and cooperating was the only way to reduce the ranch's liability. Eliza absorbed this information, trying to imagine Connor in jail. Despite everything, the image was troubling. What will happen to him? First-time offense, probably probation and restitution, Nathan said. But it's not just the legal consequences I'm worried about. He's spiraling, drinking, gambling, making threats. I don't know where it ends. Margaret set mugs of tea in front of them, her hands steady despite the emotion in her eyes. It ends when he decides it ends. Connor has to want to change, and right now he doesn't. She took a seat across from them. In the meantime, we need to protect what matters. This ranch, this family, and the future we're building. The use of "we" wasn't lost on Eliza. Despite the circumstances of her arrival, Margaret Walsh was now counting her among those who belonged at the ranch, who had a stake in its future. The confrontation with Connor cast a shadow over the following days, but ranch life continued its relentless pace. Spring work waited for no one, calves needed vaccinating, pastures needed maintenance, and the administrative tasks that kept the operation running smoothly still required attention. Eliza threw herself into work, partly to avoid dwelling on Connor's accusations, and partly because staying busy helped manage the physical discomfort of pregnancy's middle stages. Her back ached constantly now, and her ankles swelled after long days at the desk, but there was satisfaction and productivity in seeing tangible results from her efforts. Nathan was her constant partner in these efforts, his steady presence a counterbalance to the uncertainty Connor had reintroduced into their lives. They worked side by side during the days, their professional partnership deepening as they tackled the ranch's challenges together. In the evenings, they often shared meals and quiet conversation, exploring the personal connection that was growing alongside their business relationship. "I never finished asking you that question," Nathan said one evening in late April, as they sat on the porch of Eliza's cottage watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Before Connor interrupted us, Eliza felt her heart rate quicken. "About our partnership?" Nathan nodded, his expression serious in the fading light. "I've been thinking about what it means, long term, for us to really build something together here." He took a breath, as if gathering courage. "I know this isn't conventional, and maybe it's too soon after everything that's happened, but I want to be clear about what I'm offering." He turned to face her directly. "I'd like us to consider marriage, Eliza. Not right away, not until you're ready, but eventually. A real partnership, in every sense, sharing the ranch, raising your child together, building a family that isn't defined by blood, but by choice." The proposal, for that's what it was, despite its careful phrasing, took her breath away. Not because it was unexpected, exactly. Their relationship had been moving in this direction for weeks, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way that quiet moments and unspoken understanding hadn't. "I don't want you to answer now," Nathan continued when she remained silent. "I know you came here to marry my brother, that none of this was what you planned. And I know that practical considerations, the ranch, your pregnancy, your visa status complicate everything. But I need you to understand that this isn't just about practicality for me. It's about who you are, who we are together." Eliza found her voice at last. "Nathan, he held up a hand, stopping her. "There's something else you should know before you say anything. Something I should have told you weeks ago." His expression grew troubled. "Connor called me the night before your wedding. He was drunk, talking about running away, saying he couldn't go through with it. I told him to grow up, to honor his commitments, to think about what his actions would do to you." Nathan's hands clenched in his lap. He laughed and hung up. "I should have warned you, should have told someone what he was planning. But I hoped he was just having last-minute nerves, that he'd show up in the morning like he was supposed to." By the time I realized he was serious, it was too late. The revelation hung between them, shifting Eliza's understanding of the events that had brought her to this point. "You tried to prevent it," she said softly. "That wasn't your responsibility, wasn't it?" Nathan's voice was rough with emotion. "He's my brother. I knew what kind of man he was, knew his pattern of running from commitment. I should have protected you from that." Eliza reached for his hand, covering it with her own. "If you had warned me, if the wedding had been canceled before I stood there in that church, what then? I would have returned to Ukraine in shame, probably been forced to give up this baby for adoption out of economic necessity." She shook her head. "What happened was painful, yes. But it led me here, to this ranch, to work that matters. To you." The air between them seemed to still, the world narrowing to just this moment, this conversation that would define their future. "I can't promise that I'm ready for marriage right now," Eliza said carefully. "There's still too much happening, too many changes to process. But I can promise that I want to build something real with you, Nathan. Something based on honesty and respect and genuine partnership." Her hand moved to her growing belly. "And I want this child to know you as a father, to have the stability and love that you're offering." Nathan's expression softened, hope replacing the tension that had tightened his features. "That's enough for now," he said, his voice low and sincere. "We have time to figure out the rest." As they sat together in the gathering dusk, Eliza reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had come to America seeking security through marriage to a man she barely knew. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, the chance to build a life on her own terms, with a partner who valued her for exactly who she was. The baby moved inside her, a reminder of both the past she was leaving behind and the future she was choosing to create. Whatever came next, Connor's legal troubles, the ranch's financial challenges, the complexities of blending their lives, she and Nathan would face it together, partners in the truest sense of the word. The Montana spring deepened around them, bringing new life to the land as days lengthened and wildflowers bloomed in pastures where cattle grazed. It was a season of renewal, of growth, of possibility, a perfect mirror for the life-taking shape between a woman who had traveled halfway around the world seeking belonging and a man who had been waiting for a partner who could truly share his vision for the future. As darkness settled over Walsh Ranch, lights glowed warm in windows across the property, the main house where Margaret Walsh was finding her way forward after her husband's illness and her younger son's betrayal. The bunkhouse where ranch hands who had come to respect Eliza's contribution to their livelihood prepared for another day's work. And the small cottage where two people who had found each other through circumstances neither could have predicted were beginning to envision a shared future neither had dared to imagine alone. Summer arrived in Montana with surprising intensity, transforming the landscape into a tapestry of green pastures and wildflowers that stretched to the distant mountains. Walsh Ranch pulsed with the energetic rhythm of the season, cattle being moved to higher pastures, hay being cut and baled, equipment running from dawn until dusk. Eliza's pregnancy had progressed to her third trimester, her body growing heavy with the child that would arrive before autumn's first frost. The cottage Nathan had provided now felt truly like home, decorated with modest touches that reflected her emerging sense of permanence. "The new calving record system you implemented saved us nearly 40 hours of work this season," Nathan said one evening as they reviewed the ranch's mid-year financial reports on the main house porch. The summer twilight lingered, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. "Mike says it's the smoothest calving season we've had in years." Eliza smiled, satisfied with the tangible results of her administrative overhaul. "The ranch hands deserve the credit. They've been incredibly patient with all the new procedures I've introduced." She shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position for her back. "Have you seen the second quarter numbers? We're ahead of projections on debt reduction." Nathan nodded, his expression reflecting pride that went beyond mere financial success. At this rate, we'll have Connor's debt cleared in 18 months instead of 2 years. He hesitated, his tone shifting. Speaking of Connor, I heard from the sheriff today. Eliza tensed, automatically resting her hands on her swollen belly in a protective gesture that had become instinctive. What happened? He's been arrested. In Reno. Fraud charges plus assault on a casino security guard. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as his response to stress. They're extraditing him back to Montana next week to face the credit card fraud charges here. The news settled between them, heavy with implications. Connor's shadow had receded in recent months, as they'd focused on rebuilding the ranch and preparing for the baby's arrival. Now he would be back in Pine Ridge, bringing complications neither of them wanted to face. Will you have to testify? Eliza asked, practical concerns rising to the forefront of her mind. Probably. The ranch is the victim in the fraud case. Nathan's gaze was steady on her face. You might need to make a statement, too, about the wedding expenses he charged, knowing he wasn't going to follow through. Eliza nodded, accepting this unwelcome but necessary task. Whatever helps protect the ranch. She had come to see Walsh Ranch as her responsibility, too, not just a place of employment, but a legacy worth preserving. Before Nathan could respond, Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression tense. In the months since Connor's brief return, the older woman had become an unexpected ally for Eliza, her initial skepticism replaced by a grudging respect that had gradually warmed into something like maternal concern. Dr. Harrison just called, Margaret said, her voice clipped with anxiety. Thomas has taken a turn for the worse. She's coming out to check on him, but she didn't need to finish the sentence. Thomas Walsh had been declining for months. His once robust frame now gaunt, his lucid moments increasingly rare. Nathan was on his feet immediately, all thoughts of Connor forgotten. I'll come right up. Did you call Pastor Miller? Margaret nodded, her composure slipping slightly. He'll be here within the hour. Her gaze shifted to Eliza. Would you mind making some coffee? I think we might have a long night ahead. The request was significant, not because of its simplicity, but because it acknowledged Eliza's place in this family crisis. Not as an employee or guest, but as someone who belonged in the intimate circle of those who would stand vigil as Thomas Walsh approached his final hours. Of course, Eliza said, rising awkwardly to her feet, her pregnant body making quick movements impossible. I'll bring it upstairs when it's ready. The night that followed was one of those watershed moments that divide life into distinct before and after periods. Thomas Walsh died peacefully just after midnight, his wife and son at his side, the ranch hands gathered respectfully downstairs, and Eliza moving quietly between worlds, not quite family but no longer an outsider. As dawn broke over the ranch, painting the sky in pale gold, Nathan found Eliza in the kitchen where she'd been making endless pots of coffee for the stream of neighbors and friends who had begun arriving as news spread. He's gone, Nathan said simply, his voice rough with exhaustion and grief. Dad's gone. Eliza set down the coffee pot and moved to him without hesitation, all the complicated boundaries of their relationship temporarily suspended by the primal need for human comfort. He folded into her embrace, his tall frame bending to rest his forehead against her shoulder, his hands gentle around her waist despite his need for support. I'm so sorry, she whispered, holding him as best she could with her pregnant belly. Between them, he was a good man. He built everything we have, Nathan said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. I don't know if I can carry it forward the way he would have wanted. Eliza drew back slightly, looking up into his face with steady conviction. You already are. The ranch is thriving under your management. The improvements we've made. Your father would be proud of them. Something in her words seemed to reach him, easing the tightness around his eyes. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet kitchen, connected by shared purpose and the strange, unexpected bond that had grown between them over the past 6 months. The days that followed were a blur of funeral preparations, legal matters, and the endless practical details that follow a death. The community rallied around the Walsh family, bringing food, helping with ranch chores, offering support in the practical ways that rural neighbors have done for generations. Thomas Walsh's funeral drew nearly 300 people, a testament to the respect he had earned over decades of honest dealings and community involvement. Eliza sat in the family pew beside Margaret, her presence there a statement about her evolving place in the Walsh household. No longer just an employee, not quite family, but something in between that the community had come to accept. The reading of the will, conducted in the ranch house living room 3 days after the funeral, brought revelations that shifted the ground beneath all their feet. Brian Miller, the family's longtime lawyer, cleared his throat as he prepared to read the final portion of the document. And to my younger son, Connor Walsh, I leave a cash bequest of $50,000 to be held in trust until such time as he demonstrates consistent sobriety and responsible behavior for a period of not less than 1 year, as determined by the trustee, Nathan Walsh. Miller paused, looking over his reading glasses at the small assembly. Nathan, Margaret, and Eliza, who had been asked to attend at Margaret's insistence. However, Miller continued, Connor's 15% ownership stake in Walsh Ranch Enterprises is hereby revoked due to his violation of the Family Business Code of Conduct, specifically his fraudulent use of company funds and abandonment of operational duties. Margaret gasped softly. This was clearly news to her, a change Thomas must have made after Connor's wedding day disappearance. This 15% stake, Miller read, is to be divided as follows: 10% to be retained by Walsh Ranch Enterprises as treasury shares, and 5% to be granted to any individual who, at the time of my death, has shown extraordinary commitment to the ranch's welfare and future, as determined jointly by my wife Margaret and my son Nathan. The lawyer looked up, his expression softening. Thomas added this codicil 3 weeks before his death, during one of his lucid periods. He was very specific about the wording. Nathan and Margaret exchanged a look loaded with meaning, then both turned to Eliza, whose hands had instinctively moved to cradle her belly as she absorbed the implications. I think my husband's intentions are clear, Margaret said, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. He saw what we all see, someone who came here under difficult circumstances and chose to invest herself in saving this ranch when she could have returned home. Nathan nodded, his expression solemn. Dad never did anything without careful thought. He must have seen what was happening, even from his sickbed. Eliza felt overwhelmed, unable to process the magnitude of what was being suggested. I can't accept ownership in your family's ranch, she protested. I've only been here 6 months. The work I've done, it's just my job. Margaret's laugh held a hint of her old sharpness. My dear, no employee works 18-hour days, reorganizes 60 years of chaotic bookkeeping, and creates financial recovery plans on weekends just because it's a job. You've invested yourself in this place as if it were your own. Thomas recognized that, even if you don't. Before Eliza could formulate a response, the sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. Through the window, they could see a sheriff's department vehicle pulling up to the house, followed by a familiar rental car. Connor, Nathan said grimly, rising to his feet. And it looks like he brought legal trouble with him. The scene that unfolded on the front porch minutes later was both predictable and painful. Connor Walsh, looking haggard after a week in jail, stood flanked by Sheriff Davis and a deputy, his expression a mixture of defiance and barely concealed desperation. I need to speak to my mother, he announced, ignoring Nathan completely and looking past Eliza as if she were invisible. It's about Dad's funeral, which I wasn't allowed to attend because someone pressed charges against me. His glare shifted. briefly to his brother. You weren't allowed to attend because you assaulted a security guard and committed fraud, Sheriff Davis corrected mildly. The judge granted compassionate release for you to visit your mother today, but you'll be returning to custody afterward until your arraignment tomorrow. Margaret stepped forward, her slight frame somehow commanding as she faced her younger son. Come inside, Connor. We can talk in the study. She turned to the sheriff. Thank you for bringing him, Jim. We'll respect the court's conditions. The conversation that followed was private, but its effects rippled through the household. When Margaret emerged from the study an hour later, her eyes were red, but her composure intact. Connor has agreed to plead guilty to the fraud charges, she told Nathan and Eliza, who had been waiting anxiously in the kitchen, in exchange for a reduced sentence and rehab instead of jail time. He's also agreed to sign over his remaining financial interest in the ranch in lieu of restitution. Nathan's eyebrows rose in surprise. That doesn't sound like Connor. What changed? Margaret's smile was sad, but tinged with something like relief. I told him about your father's will, about the trust conditions on his inheritance and the reallocation of his ownership stake. She sighed deeply. And I told him that his child deserves better than a father who runs from responsibility and breaks laws when things get difficult. Eliza froze, her hand automatically moving to protect her belly. You told him that it's not his child, Margaret finished firmly. I made that very clear. But I also told him that someday, when he's sober and truly changed, he might have a place in this family again, as an uncle to your baby, as a brother to Nathan, as a son to me. Not as an owner or decision-maker for the ranch, but as family. The wisdom of Margaret's approach struck Eliza forcefully. She had offered Connor something more valuable than money or property rights, the possibility of redemption, of restored relationships, if he was willing to do the hard work of earning them. As the sheriff's car drove away with Connor, Eliza felt a weight lifting that she hadn't fully acknowledged was there. The specter of Connor's return, of his potential claim on her life or the ranch, had haunted the edges of her growing contentment. Now that threat was diminished, replaced by the clear-eyed accountability Margaret had established. That evening, as the heat of the July day finally began to fade, Nathan found Eliza sitting on the cottage porch, watching fireflies rise from the nearby meadow. Without speaking, he settled into the chair beside her, the comfortable silence between them a testament to how far they had come since that first awkward conversation in a motel room. I spoke with Brian Miller about the ownership stake, Nathan said finally. It's legally binding. Dad made sure of that. 5% ownership in a ranch this size is significant, Eliza. She nodded, still struggling to accept this unexpected development. I don't know what to say, Nathan. I came here with nothing, expecting to leave as soon as my visa situation was resolved. Now I'm about to have a baby. I own part of a ranch and I'm... She hesitated, unsure how to define what she was to this family, to this place, to him. You're essential, Nathan finished for her, his voice low and certain, to the ranch. To my mother, who looks at you now the way she once looked at her own daughters before they moved away. To me, he took a breath as if gathering courage. Especially to me. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, making Eliza gasp and laugh simultaneously. Someone else wants to be included in this conversation, she said, placing her hand where the movement was strongest. Without asking, Nathan reached over and gently placed his large, calloused hand beside hers. The simple intimacy of the gesture, something that would have been unimaginable months ago, felt right, natural. I've been thinking about what comes next, he said, his eyes on their hands resting together on her belly. After the baby comes. After your visa situation needs to be addressed. Eliza nodded, practicalities never far from her mind despite the emotional complexity of their situation. My visa expires 3 months after the birth. I've been researching options, but without the marriage to Connor. Marry me instead. The words hung in the summer twilight, simple and direct and world-changing. Eliza's breath caught as she turned to look at him, searching his face for signs that this was merely a practical solution to an immigration problem. What she saw in his eyes was something far more profound. "I know it's not romantic," Nathan continued, his gaze steady on hers. "I know it's not what you dreamed of when you came to America. But I think we could build something good together. Eliza, something real. I care about you, not just as the mother of my niece or nephew, not just as a business partner who saved this ranch, but as a woman I've come to admire and—" He hesitated, then finished with quiet certainty, "and love." The declaration, so simply stated yet so profound in its implications, brought tears to Eliza's eyes. 6 months ago, she had stood abandoned at an altar, believing her dreams of security and family were shattered forever. Now this steady, honorable man was offering her something far more valuable than what she had lost, not just legal status or financial security, but a partnership based on genuine respect and growing love. "This isn't because of the visa," she said, needing to be certain, "or because of the baby. Those are factors," Nathan acknowledged honestly. "But no, that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because these past 6 months have shown me what kind of woman you are. Strong, resilient, brilliant at running this ranch, unafraid of hard work." His smile softened his serious expression. "And because I find myself thinking about you when you're not around, missing you when you go into town for a day, looking forward to our evening conversations more than any other part of my day." Eliza felt something unfurl in her chest, a warm certainty that had been growing quietly beneath the practical concerns and daily work that had occupied her mind. "I need you to know something," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I'm not looking for a father for this baby. I've always been prepared to raise my child alone, if necessary." "I know that," Nathan replied. "Your independence is one of the things I admire most about you. But I'd like the chance to be a father to your child, if you'll let me. Not because the baby needs one, but because I want to be there, for doctor's appointments and first steps and school plays, and everything that comes after." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, touching something in Eliza that went beyond practical considerations. This wasn't the fairy tale romance she might have dreamed of as a young girl, but it was something better, a relationship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine caring that had grown naturally from working side by side through difficult circumstances. "Yes," she said simply, "I'll marry you, Nathan. Not for the visa or the ranch or even for the baby, but because I think we could build something beautiful together." His smile transformed his usually serious face, years seeming to fall away. As he leaned forward to kiss her, their first kiss, surprisingly tender for a man whose life had been defined by the physical demands of ranching, Eliza leaned into it, allowing herself to experience the moment fully, without the caution that had characterized so much of her life. When they drew apart, Nathan kept his hand over hers on her belly, where the baby had settled into quieter movements. "We should tell my mother," he said, his voice lighter than Eliza had ever heard it. "Though I suspect she's been hoping for this outcome for months now." Eliza laughed, remembering Margaret's knowing looks and increasingly unsubtle hints about how well they worked together. "Your mother sees more than she says. She's probably had this planned since February." The joke held more truth than either of them acknowledged aloud. Margaret Walsh was a perceptive woman who had recognized the potential between them long before they had admitted it to themselves. Her acceptance of Eliza had paved the way for the ranch community's acceptance, creating space for this unexpected relationship to develop naturally. As darkness settled over the ranch and stars emerged in the vast Montana sky, Eliza felt a profound sense of rightness. 6 months ago, abandoned and alone in a foreign country, she could never have imagined finding home in this place with these people. The journey had been difficult, marked by loss and uncertainty, but it had led her to something authentic and valuable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Connor's legal proceedings, preparations for the baby's arrival, planning a wedding that would secure her immigration status. But tonight, sitting on the porch with Nathan's hand warm over hers, Eliza allowed herself to simply experience gratitude for the unexpected turns that had brought her here, to this moment of quiet certainty about the future they would build. Together. "I need a partner," Nathan had told her that first day in the motel room, "and you need a home." What neither of them had realized then was how completely those needs would align, creating something neither had been looking for but both had been missing: a chance to build a life based not on necessity or convenience, but on the kind of partnership that could weather any storm because it was rooted in something true. As fireflies danced in the gathering darkness and the ranch settled into nighttime quiet, Eliza Foster, soon to be Eliza Walsh, felt the baby move again. A gentle reminder of how life continues to unfold in unexpected ways, bringing new beginnings when we least expect them, but perhaps when we need them most. The September morning dawned clear and cool, Montana's first hint of autumn painting golden edges on the aspen leaves. Eliza stood at the window of the ranch house's master bedroom, one hand resting on her 9-month belly, watching ranch hands move cattle to lower pastures in preparation for the coming change of seasons. 6 weeks had passed since Nathan's proposal, weeks filled with wedding preparations, legal consultations about her immigration status, and the final renovations to the main house where they would live after the marriage. "You should be resting," Margaret said, entering the room with a cup of herbal tea. "The wedding is tomorrow, and this little one could decide to arrive any minute." She placed her hand beside Eliza's on the swollen belly, smiling as the baby responded with a vigorous kick. "I can't seem to sit still," Eliza admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "There's still so much to organize before the ceremony." Margaret's laugh was gentle but firm. "The ceremony is handled. Pastor Miller has his instructions. The community center is decorated, and half the women in Pine Ridge have been baking since Tuesday." She guided Eliza to the comfortable chair near the window. "Your job today is to rest and prepare yourself for becoming both a mother and a wife within what might be a very short span of time." The dual transition looming before her was momentous, perhaps even more significant than the journey that had brought her from Ukraine to Montana in the first place. 8 months ago, she had arrived as a mail-order bride, expecting to marry a man she barely knew. Now she was marrying a different Walsh brother, carrying another man's child, and stepping into co-ownership of a ranch that had become more home to her than anywhere she had ever lived. "What if I'm not ready?" Eliza asked softly, voicing the fear that had been growing alongside her belly. For any of it, marriage, motherhood, being part of this community permanently. Margaret settled on the edge of the bed, her expression thoughtful. "No one is ever truly ready for life's biggest changes, my dear. When the first married Thomas, I was 19 and terrified. When I became a mother, I was 21 and convinced I would fail at it." Her smile held decades of hard-earned wisdom. "We grow into our roles one day at a time, making mistakes, learning, adjusting. The question isn't whether you're ready, it's whether you're willing to grow into what's coming." The simple truth of this perspective eased something tight in Eliza's chest. She didn't have to be perfect tomorrow or the day after. She just had to be willing to try, to learn, to adapt skills she had already demonstrated throughout the tumultuous past 8 months. "I am willing," she said, the affirmation strengthening her. "More than willing. I want this life, this family, this community." Margaret's answering smile was warm with approval. "Then you're as ready as anyone ever is for the big leaps." She rose, smoothing her skirt with practical hands. "Now, I'm going to check on the flower arrangements and make sure Nathan isn't working himself into exhaustion before his wedding day. You rest. Doctor's orders." After Margaret left, Eliza sipped her tea and let her mind wander through the events that had brought her to this threshold. The wedding that wasn't. The job offer that became a partnership. The practical arrangement that had blossomed, against all expectations, into genuine love. The sound of a vehicle on the gravel drive drew her attention back to the window. A taxi was pulling up, an unusual sight at the ranch, where most visitors arrived in trucks or SUVs equipped for rural roads. Eliza watched curiously as the driver helped his passenger unload several bags. The woman who emerged was striking tall, elegantly dressed in clothes that screamed urban sophistication, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek knot. Something about her was vaguely familiar, though Eliza was certain they had never met. Curious, she made her way carefully down the stairs, one hand on the railing to support her unwieldy body. By the time she reached the front door, Margaret was already there, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and wariness. "Alexandra," Margaret said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." The elegant woman offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I imagine it is. But when I heard about Dad's death, and now Nathan's wedding, well, family should be together for these things, shouldn't they?" Eliza's breath caught as she realized who this must be, Alexandra Walsh, Nathan and Connor's older sister, who had left the ranch 15 years ago for a career in Chicago. Nathan rarely spoke of her, and when he did, it was with a complicated mixture of pride and hurt that suggested their relationship was strained at best. Margaret's gaze shifted to Eliza, who stood halfway down the stairs. "Alexandra, this is Eliza Foster. Eliza, this is my daughter Alexandra." Alexandra turned, her assessing gaze taking in Eliza's pregnant figure and simple dress with a single sweep. "So you're the mail-order bride Connor abandoned. And now you're marrying Nathan." Her tone made the simple statement sound vaguely accusatory. "Mother has filled me in on some of the details, but I admit I'm curious about how all this came to be." Before Eliza could respond, the front door opened again and Nathan entered, dust from the morning's work still on his clothes. His expression shifting from contentment to shock as he registered his sister's presence. "Alex," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "this is a surprise." Alexandra moved to kiss her brother's cheek, the gesture more formal than affectionate. "I heard my little brother was getting married. How could I miss that?" She stepped back, studying him. "You look tired, Nate. Is the ranch running you into the ground like it did Dad?" The subtle criticism in her tone was unmistakable. Eliza felt a protective instinct rise within her, surprising in its intensity. This woman might be family by blood, but she clearly knew little about the ranch's current operations or Nathan's leadership. "Actually," Eliza said, descending the last few stairs to join them, "Walsh Ranch is thriving under Nathan's management. We've increased productivity by 20% this year, while reducing operational costs and implementing sustainable practices that have drawn attention from agricultural researchers." Alexandra's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose at Eliza's confident assessment. "We've increased? You're already speaking as an owner, I see." "Eliza is an owner," Nathan said quietly, moving to stand beside her. "She holds a 5% stake in the ranch, awarded by Dad before his death in recognition of her contributions. And after tomorrow, as my wife, she'll share my 30% stake as well." The information clearly surprised Alexandra, whose composed expression flickered briefly. "How progressive of Dad. I wouldn't have expected that from him." Margaret stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding as she took control of the increasingly tense situation. "Alexandra, I'll show you to the guest room. You must be tired after your journey from Chicago." She turned to Nathan and Eliza. "Dinner will be at 6. That should give everyone time to rest and freshen up." The diplomatic dismissal was clear. As Alexandra followed her mother upstairs, Nathan turned to Eliza, concern evident in his face. "I'm sorry about that. I had No idea she was coming. "It's all right," Eliza assured him, though uncertainty lurked beneath her calm exterior. "She's your sister. Of course she should be here for your wedding." Nathan's expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of this. "Alex left the ranch 15 years ago and has barely looked back. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with this life." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Eliza now recognized as a sign of stress. "Her showing up now, the day before our wedding. It feels like there's something more to it." Eliza placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Whatever her reasons, she's here now. Let's try to make the best of it." The dinner that evening was a masterclass in polite tension. Alexandra asked questions about the ranch's operations that seemed designed to highlight problems rather than acknowledge successes. She referred repeatedly to her thriving career as an investment banker, making subtle comparisons between her urban achievements and what she clearly viewed as the limited scope of ranch life. "So after the baby comes, what are your plans, Eliza?" Alexandra asked over dessert, her tone suggesting genuine curiosity, though her eyes remained calculating. "Will you continue working on the ranch or focus on motherhood?" The question carried loaded assumptions about the incompatibility of motherhood and career that Eliza had encountered throughout her professional life. "I'll be doing both," she answered calmly. "The ranch office is being renovated to include a nursery area, and Nathan and I have worked out a schedule that allows each of us time with the baby while maintaining our responsibilities to the operation." Alexandra's smile was tinged with skepticism. "That sounds ambitious. Ranch work doesn't exactly conform to predictable schedules." "Which is why we've built flexibility into our plan," Nathan interjected, his patience clearly wearing thin. "The entire ranch team is supportive, including Mom, who's already volunteered for regular grandmother duties." Margaret nodded, her expression warming as she looked at Eliza. "This baby will be raised the way ranch children have been for generations, as part of a community that values family and work as complementary rather than competing priorities." The conversation shifted to wedding details, but the undercurrent of tension remained. As the evening wound down, Eliza found herself exhausted, the baby particularly active, as if responding to her stress. She excused herself early, retreating to the bedroom that would soon be officially hers and Nathan's, though she had been staying in the main house for the past week as they prepared for both the wedding and the baby's arrival. She was brushing her hair before bed when a soft knock sounded at the door. Expecting Nathan, she was surprised to find Alexandra standing there, her sophisticated daywear exchanged for silk pajamas that probably cost more than a month of ranch expenses. "May I come in?" Alexandra asked, her voice softer than it had been at dinner. "I think we should talk, just the two of us." Wary but willing to extend the benefit of the doubt, Eliza gestured for her to enter. Alexandra moved with the same confidence she displayed in everything, settling gracefully in the armchair near the window. "I owe you an apology," she began. Surprising Eliza, "I've been difficult today. Coming back here after so long, seeing how much has changed, how much hasn't. It's more emotional than I expected." The admission seemed genuine, a crack in the polished facade Alexandra had maintained throughout the day. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for her to continue. "When I left the ranch, I was running away from what I saw as a life of limitation." Alexandra continued, her gaze shifting to the window where the vast Montana landscape stretched beneath a star-filled sky. "I wanted more than cattle and fences and the same horizons every day. I wanted opportunities my mother never had, choices beyond marriage and motherhood." Eliza nodded, understanding this perspective better than Alexandra might have guessed. "I had similar ambitions in Ukraine. I worked my way up from secretary to office manager, took night classes in business administration. Being a mail-order bride wasn't my dream. It was a practical decision made under difficult circumstances." Alexandra studied her with new interest. Yet here you are, embracing exactly the life I escaped: marriage, motherhood, the ranch. The difference, Eliza said gently, is that I'm choosing this life with open eyes, knowing its challenges and its rewards. I'm not sacrificing my ambitions, I'm redirecting them into building something meaningful here, with Nathan. Something shifted in Alexandra's expression: respect, perhaps, or recognition. You're different than I expected, she admitted. When Mother told me about the mail-order bride Connor abandoned, and Nathan was now marrying, I imagined. She trailed off, apparently realizing the unflattering assumptions she had made. You imagine someone desperate and clinging, Eliza finished for her. Someone looking for security at any cost, willing to switch brothers because one is as good as another for her purposes. Alexandra had the grace to look embarrassed. Something like that, yes. But you're clearly not that person. She leaned forward, her expression earnest for the first time. Do you love my brother? Not just as a provider or partner, but really love him? The directness of the question deserved equal directness in response. Yes, Eliza said simply. Not in the fairy tale way I might have imagined love as a girl. It's grown gradually, built on respect and shared purpose, and discovering who he truly is beneath the quiet exterior. I love his integrity, his steadiness, his capacity for growth. She rested her hands on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. And I believe he loves me, not despite my complications but including them. Alexandra absorbed this, nodding slowly. Nathan was always the best of us, the most honorable, the most genuine. He deserves happiness. She hesitated, then added, So do you, from what I can see. The conversation marked a turning point. Over the next hour, the two women talked more openly about Alexandra's life in Chicago, about Eliza's journey from Ukraine, about their shared concern for Connor, who was now in a residential rehabilitation facility as part of his plea agreement. I should have come back when Connor started spiraling, Alexandra admitted, regret evident in her voice. Maybe if I'd been here, if I'd tried to intervene. We can't know what might have happened, Eliza said gently. Connor made his choices. Now he has the chance to make better ones. By the time Alexandra left for the guest room, something had shifted between them, not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect that promised the possibility of a genuine family connection in the future. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. The kind of crystalline September morning that showed Montana at its most beautiful. Eliza woke early, the baby particularly active, as if aware of the significance of the day. She took her time dressing in the simple ivory gown she and Margaret had found in Bozeman, an empire waist design that accommodated her pregnancy while still looking elegantly bridal. Margaret and Alexandra helped with her hair and the final touches, the three women finding an unexpected harmony in the shared ritual. When they finished, Eliza hardly recognized herself in the mirror, not because of the dress or the carefully arranged hair, but because of the quiet joy that transformed her features, making her more beautiful than any cosmetic enhancement could achieve. You look like a woman who has found her place in the world, Margaret said softly, adjusting Eliza's necklace, a simple silver pendant that had belonged to Nathan's grandmother. That's the most beautiful thing anyone can wear. The ceremony at Pine Ridge Community Center was small by local standards, just 60 guests, mostly ranch employees and neighbors who had become friends over the past 8 months. Eliza walked down the aisle alone, a choice that felt right for a woman who had crossed continents and rebuilt her life through her own courage and determination. Nathan waited at the altar, his usual ranch clothes replaced by a well-tailored suit that transformed him without disguising the essential nature of the man: strong, reliable, genuine. The look in his eyes as she approached contained everything Eliza had ever wanted to see there, not just desire or admiration, but deep respect and a partnership that went beyond romance into something more enduring. Pastor Miller kept the ceremony brief but meaningful, acknowledging the unusual circumstances that had brought them together, while celebrating the authentic bond that had formed. Sometimes, he said, looking out at the gathered community, the most beautiful journeys are the ones we never planned to take. Eliza came to Pine Ridge expecting one life and found another, not lesser, just different. Nathan expected to manage this ranch alone and instead discovered a true partner who strengthens everything they build together. The vows they exchanged were traditional in structure but personalized in content, each promising to support the other's dreams, to face challenges as a team, to build a home where both could flourish. When Nathan slipped the simple gold band onto Eliza's finger, his hands were steady and sure, the hands of a man who knew exactly what he was choosing and why. The kiss that sealed their marriage was tender and profound, a public declaration of a private certainty that had been growing between them for months. The applause that followed was warm with genuine approval. This community had watched their relationship develop and recognized its authentic value. The reception that followed was a true Montana celebration, abundant food, local music, and the kind of relaxed joy that comes from people who work hard and celebrate with equal commitment. Eliza found herself surrounded by well-wishers who had once been strangers but were now neighbors and friends, people who had accepted her based on her contributions rather than her origins. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the community center lawn, Eliza slipped away for a moment of quiet, finding a bench beneath a towering pine tree. She needed a breath, a pause to absorb the magnitude of the day's transition. Alexandra found her there, 2 glasses of sparkling cider in hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering one to Eliza. Wedding days are overwhelming even without being 9 months pregnant. Eliza accepted the drink gratefully. "Thank you. I just needed a moment to catch my breath." Alexandra settled beside her, surprisingly comfortable in her elegant dress. Despite the rustic setting, "I've been watching you today, how naturally you interact with everyone, how completely you seem to belong here." Her smile held a touch of wonder. 8 months ago, you were a stranger in a foreign country, abandoned and alone. Now you're the heart of this community. The observation caught Eliza by surprise. She had been so focused on the work of building her new life that she hadn't fully recognized how completely she had been integrated into the fabric of Pine Ridge. "I was thinking about something similar earlier," she admitted. "About how the worst moment of my life standing alone at that altar led me to exactly where I was meant to be. If Connor had shown up that day, if the wedding had proceeded as planned." She shook her head, unable to imagine that alternate reality now. "I would have had security, maybe, but not this sense of purpose, not this genuine partnership with Nathan." Alexandra nodded thoughtfully. "Life's hardest moments often redirect us to paths we would never have chosen, but end up being exactly right." She glanced back toward the reception, where Nathan was visible talking with ranch hands, his expression more relaxed and happy than Eliza had ever seen it. "He's different with you, more confident, more at peace. You've given him something no one else could." "We've given each other what we needed," Eliza corrected gently. "That's what real partnership means." Before Alexandra could respond, Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her abdomen as a sharp contraction gripped her. "Oh," she breathed as it passed. That was different from the practice contractions. Alexandra's eyes widened. "Are you saying, now? The baby's coming now?" Eliza took a careful breath, mentally calculating dates. She was 4 days from her due date, perfectly reasonable for labor to begin. "I think it might be starting, yes. But first babies often take their time. There's no need to disrupt the reception yet." But Alexandra was already on her feet, her city sophistication giving way to practical action. "I'm getting Nathan and calling Dr. Harrison. Wedding or not, this baby deserves a proper welcome." The news spread quickly through the reception, creating a buzz of excitement that transformed the wedding celebration into something even more joyful, a double blessing. The community declared a marriage and a birth on the same auspicious day. Nathan appeared at Eliza's side within minutes, his face a mixture of concern and elation. "Is it really time?" he asked, kneeling beside her bench, his hand covering hers on her belly. Eliza nodded, another contraction building as she spoke. "I think your child has decided that one celebration today isn't enough." His smile was brilliant as he helped her to her feet. "Our child," he corrected gently. "From this day forward, in every way that matters." The next 12 hours were a blur of intensity as Eliza's labor progressed faster than expected for a first birth. Dr. Harrison noted with approval. Nathan never left her side, his steady presence an anchor as she navigated the primal journey of bringing new life into the world. Just after midnight, as the wedding day gave way to a new dawn, Sophia Grace Walsh entered the world with a robust cry that filled the hospital room with its life-affirming power. Pink and perfect, with a cap of dark hair and eyes that would later reveal themselves to be deep blue, she was immediately placed on Eliza's chest. The connection between mother and daughter, instantaneous and profound. "She's beautiful," Nathan whispered, his voice rough with emotion as he counted tiny fingers and toes. "Perfect." Eliza looked up at him, exhausted but radiant with the deepest joy she had ever known. "She is," she agreed, watching as his large, calloused finger was grasped by Sophia's tiny hand, a physical manifestation of the bond that was already forming between this man and the child he was choosing to claim as his own. In the quiet of that hospital room, as Montana's vast sky lightened with the promise of a new day, Eliza felt the completion of a circle that had begun in desperation, but was ending in profound gratitude. 8 months ago, abandoned and alone in a foreign country, she could never have imagined this outcome: a husband who cherished her for exactly who she was, a child who represented hope rather than complication, a community that had embraced her based on her contributions rather than her origins. "I need a partner," Nathan had said on that first day, "and you need a home." What neither of them had realized then was how completely those needs would align, creating something neither had been looking for, but both had been missing: a chance to build a life based not on necessity or convenience, but on the kind of partnership that transforms both people into their best selves. As Sophia nursed for the first time, her tiny fingers still wrapped around Nathan's, Eliza understood with perfect clarity that sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive disguised as its greatest disappointments. The wedding that wasn't had led to the family that was meant to be, not the one she had planned or expected, but infinitely more valuable because it had been built on truth rather than convenience, on genuine connection rather than practical arrangement. Outside the hospital window, Montana's landscape stretched toward distant mountains, the ranch waiting for their return, the future open with possibilities neither of them could have imagined on their own. The pregnant mail-order bride who had been left at the altar had found something far more precious than what she had lost: not just a husband or a home, but a life of her own choosing, built on the foundation of her own strength and the partnership of a man who saw her value not in what she needed from him, but in what they could create together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.